Hello, friends. It's 10 o'clock-ish on a Tuesday in Redmond, so it's time for .NET API review. We have a whole lot of blocking things today, because why not? I don't know. We keep burning through everything assigned to the current release, so let's see if we can keep up that trend this week. First up, if I can find my focus, compiler lowering preserve attribute runtime 103430.
So I can speak to this one. That works.
Yep.
So the idea is that we have certain attributes, well, namely dynamically accessed members attribute that aid downstream from the compiler IL analysis tools, ILLink and ILC. And these attributes can be applied to various constructs in code, like type parameters, fields, method parameters, etc. And sometimes the compiler will lower these constructs in generated code. So the main examples that we have are primary constructor parameters and type parameters that get lowered into compiler-generated state machines. So the idea is that we want dynamically accessed members attribute to flow to the compiler-generated constructs, but we don't want all attributes on these member types to flow to compiler-generated code. So the proposal here is for a new attribute that can be applied to another attribute, and we intend to apply it to dynamically accessed members attribute so that the applied to attribute will flow to the compiler-generated code. And basically the idea is any attribute that has IL-based semantics should get this attribute applied to tell the compiler to flow it so that the downstream IL analysis tools can use it. And that's pretty much it. So it'll make it so that you can annotate a primary constructor parameter, and the compiler generated field will get dynamically accessed members attribute. And one more thing to mention is that the attribute targets, the attribute usage attribute targets. Well, for the example of primary constructor parameters, if you apply dynamically accessed members to a primary constructor parameter, the compiler might lower it to a field. So the construct on which the attribute is applied in user code might not be the same as the member type that's generated. So the idea is to flow it whenever the compiler generates something that has compatible attribute targets. Yeah, and that's pretty much all I can think of on that. So
I mean, so the shape of what you say you want it to do seems reasonable. Do you really expect this to be only used by a handful of attributes in the universe? Because it feels like just everything should flow, and that just makes life easier. Is my personal feeling.
yeah, when this was proposed, we discussed whether maybe all attributes should just flow. The main reason we didn't want to do that is because we don't know the universe of all attributes out there, and some of them might mean different things when they're applied, for example, to a parameter versus a field. And so we thought it would be safer to make it opt-in. Dynamically accessed members does behave sort of semantically the way that you would expect, same way for parameters and for fields, but that might not be true everywhere. So we got the feedback that we wanted it to be opt-in.
Fair enough. All right. Anybody have anything they want to say?
Only that the compiler implemented this 6 months ago, so we'd really prefer to change nothing.
And silence has it.
You did hear Fred, though. You hear us, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, sorry. One more thing, actually. I just noticed that it should probably be sealed, I think.
That's fair.
Just put that in. Awesome. Thanks.
The yeah, we have, well, guidelines do say leave things unsealed unless you have a reason. We've been
Okay.
sealing attributes, especially when they're being read by tooling, so that we don't have to answer the question.
The compiler won't see inherited, so we'd have a reason to seal this.
Right.
Don't
So,
inherit from it; it won't work.
right. That's so. On the attributes,
Okay.
we have been sealing them, so that we don't have to say, you can do it, but it won't work, or oh, now we need to go write this feature in the generator, and it's like sealed until we have a reason not to.
Okay, good.
For the attributes.
Cool, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, I think we get 4 tensors in a row. So, fix the name of certain tensor create APIs to remove ambiguity. Runtime 117372.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, so because of the shape of, so we have the create APIs, and we have ones that allow functionally creating from a shape that is the lengths, which is multidimensional, and the strides, which are optional parameter, which is an optional parameter, and as per normal collection type APIs, we also have ones that allow creating from effectively seed data, so passing in an initial array that specifies here's the elements to populate the collection with effectively. With single dimensional data, this is trivial. There's never any conflicts because you've got TArray for the data, and then you've got just int for the shape, which is the length. For the tensor, it's multidimensional, so we have a span for the data, we have a span for the lengths, and in certain scenarios, those conflict, such as if you're trying to create something from inint-based data, in which case the lengths and the data, people end up using it wrong. So the suggestion here was we keep the create API for creating from the data, because that's how a lot of people are used to doing things, new list data, blah, blah, blah. And then we take the one that's different from most of the other collection types, that is, it's taking the multidimensional shape, and we make that one with a new name. So create from shape and create from shape uninitialized. And then to simplify things as well, we were suggesting removing the one that takes an IEnumerable, because that one is potentially confusing when you specify it with shapes. So if you just provide the data, there is no strict shape to create from. If you do provide a shape, then it's confusing on how you populate using that, because of how you iterate the IEnumerable. And then we don't strictly need to create and fill APIs. We have create uninitialized and we have fill. So we can avoid some ambiguities there by just telling people to call the sequence.
And create uninitialized is calling the array uninitialized create.
Yeah, it just it creates the tensor using the uninitialized API, and so you may or may not get zeroed data.
Okay.
Definitely open to alternative suggestions for the name, if anyone has one, but this was what came to mind, create from shape.
Right. And again, just reiterating, create creates using shape data, but also fill data, and create from shape is creating without the fill data, just the shape data.
Right.
Yeah. So this is more, I know my output is going to be a 20 by 20 by 5, and I'm going to start calculating things and writing into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Seems fine to me. Stefan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it looks okay.
Yeah, and
Looks
then
good.
I listed the tensor span ones here. There's no changes, but they use constructors just because it's what the other span types do. But that also, I listed them for uh, to help show that the regular create API matches to the equivalent constructors, just to show that parity between them.
Well, but create from shape has no mirror
Yeah,
down it,
there
right?
isn't one for tensor span because you need to specify what you need to have a concrete holder for the backing data.
Right. Okay, so you're saying that the pattern is a constructor on tensor span is a create on tensor, and
Yes.
if it's not a constructor on tensor span, then it needs to be named something disambiguating.
Yes, that is better words than I used.
Okay. All right. Just gonna go ahead and yoink those off the approval notes. And then, yep. Changes proposed. All right. TensorMarshal, we probably want another person in the room for.
Which other person?
Steve, Levi,
Oh, okay.
Eric St. John. Like, we're technically under quorum right now.
Okay. This is notably just mirroring effectively memory Marshal, but for tensor. But yeah, but we can definitely wait if
Fair
need
enough.
be.
I mean,
Yeah.
Is the next one easier?
Yeah. This one is so tensor span gives the multidimensional view. But there are various optimizations and things that don't exist for TensorSpan. One, it's out of box, so we can't really add those optimizations to the JIT, but also it's multidimensional, so it's more complicated. When you're working with the tensor and you're working with the and you're iterating through the rows or columns, you're going to have a linear sequence of data. So you're effectively going to be getting a one-dimensional row at a time, for example. This is effectively a helper that allows you to get that one-dimensional linear sequence, and it errors if there's any gaps in between the data. So it doesn't allow you to do unsafe things. It's just the optimization of effectively get tensor span and then get span from tensor span for the length of data specified.
Okay, and it needs an index collection because this is saying starting at sub 3, sub 11, sub 25, give me the next 104 things.
Correct.
Okay.
And length is required, not optional, because tensor spans use inint-based length. There can be more than 2.14 billion elements, so users need to be explicit about how many elements they're wanting to take.
Does
And-
it,
Guess
like, can it give you less than the length
No.
in the output span?
The user needs to know how long their row is.
Yeah, so I assume try get span. If length would hit a, I'm going to call it a hole. If length would hit a hole, then it'll return false and get span would throw.
Correct.
And
that's the only reason it would throw false or return false.
well, if it hits the omni hole of ran off the end of the set.
Yes.
Sure.
If you consider everything outside to also be a hole.
Yeah. Is this like what topography or whatever it's called? Yeah.
And then if you have, let's just say it's a matrix with 2 rows, and you ask for 0, 0, and the length of the flat dimension, will you get both rows, or does it yell at you when you slam into the row wall?
It will get you both rows.
Okay. Which I believe
have
answers the chat question.
Yeah, we have many other tensor APIs that allow you to effectively flatten the view, including flatten to and copy to span, etc. So this is really just doing the same thing, but getting you a direct span over the underlying data. That way you don't have to go and manually manipulate birefs, do dangerous things. We will do the safe thing for you and make it efficient.
Okay. And now we get the good old, how do we spell indexes in .NET?
I believe I followed the correct convention here, because we've discussed it several times now.
Yeah. But it's one of those things where you
Yeah.
remember not that one, and then you don't remember which the thing that you don't remember is.
Yes.
So, indexes, never indices. Okay. Yes, indexes, no indices. Okay. All right, and this seems fine to me. Stefan's not complaining.
Ship it.
I don't know where that extra space came from. Try get span has an out parameter of span. Why not read only span? Because from a span you can get a read only span, but from read only span you can't without cheating get back to a span. So
yeah,
it's giving back the most permissible thing it can. Read only tensor gives a read only span because it's not supposed to allow writing. Oh, I guess that's. Is tensor not a read only tensor?
No, the regular tensor is writable. And
Sorry,
if you want,
but does it not also comma I read only tensor?
yeah,
It's
I tensor
explicit.
inherits from I read only tensor, and so it's explicitly implemented on the type. The read only one is.
Okay.
I guess that's something we don't talk about. Yeah, like, are we adding these as? I
Okay.
assume we're adding the
He said publicly
iTensor
exposed.
ones. Oh, I see now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the try get spans are both going to be public and disambiguated by that out that you ask for?
No. Oh, okay. So the I guess we could do that. The plan had been to explicitly implement the I read only get span and I read only try get span ones, because you can't expose both get spans.
Right.
And you don't need to. there's a little bit of convenience if you implement both try get spans, in that you don't have to create a span local. So we could expose both, but I had just been planning on explicitly implementing those ones.
Okay. I also like exposing both because it means you can't write out var.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I would suggest that the try get spans are both publicly exposed using out disambiguation.
Okay.
But then agree that the public get span on tensor should be span for the same reason that try get span on iTensor is span.
All right, not that I care a ton, but like, why not just like, yeah, for explicitly implement all the iRead-only tensor stuff on tensor and tensor span, and then you don't have to disambiguate. That seems better. Give you the most permissive thing. You could change it.
The main consideration is out variables don't allow implicit conversion. So if you have a read-only span local and you were wanting to do try out, then you'd have to create a span temporary and then cast it and then assign it to the read-only span local that you actually wanted.
Oh no, my stack space. Yeah, I mean, but then you can't use var.
Yeah, and then you can't use var.
I feel like it's 99% of people will want the span one. Do you not? On the tensor span, or at the very least won't care if they get the span one versus the read only span.
Yeah, but it also probably doesn't matter. You can still
But like, why have so many public members that are like so close to each other? It's just noisy.
It's kind of how out works.
Yeah, I mean, I would. I think it's a lot cleaner just to explicitly implement all the read-only stuff on the non-read-only tensor. You can always cast the entire tensor to an iRead-only tensor, right? Like if you want to use those methods, like, or just pass it to a method that takes an iRead-only tensor. Like there's so many ways.
Expensive ways.
I mean, maybe passing it to another method. Hopefully not casting.
Well, and we're getting a bit into the weeds here, but the tensor span types are large. They are 128 bytes. There is a fairly significant cost to doing the conversion, even with the JIT, even with everything the JIT can do. So you don't always want to have to do those conversions if you can avoid them. But I don't think it really matters. The difference between it is really just, you're inconveniencing in that you can't use var, or conveniencing depending on who you are. And if you do the other way, then you're forcing extra span locals to be created, and extra state to be managed in your method versus not. And so you're going to have some people convenienced and some people inconvenienced either way.
All right. I'm okay with whatever we decide. But yeah, it's not that important.
Indeed. Yeah. So I favor on the make everything here public on the types that are doing them, aside from places that you'll get a compile failure. And but in the end, it doesn't super duper matter. Just occurred to me that those can't both be public, even though the note here said public. So
Yeah, it was worth thinking about because yeah, it does change the usability slightly.
yay, double headers. we still don't have other people, including Aaron for his item.
Steven said that he was just going to miss the first part, so we can wait on this one until he gets here if you still want to.
Okay. No, don't give me a control. I want the thing behind you. Teams, I don't ever... I can move it off the window entirely. I wish I could close it, but I can at least move it off the window. Alright. Do we have anybody here to talk about allow custom filtering logic for fake logger? This is extensions 5615.
Yeah, hello. That's one for me.
Okay.
So this one is coming from an external customer. They are seeking to extend the already existing fake logger and fake log collector logic. We have this fake log collector options that are already existing, and they have already two filtering capabilities. One is filtering by log level, another one is filtering by category. But they would like to extend this so that the user the caller can define their own predicate and customly filter, joining these filtering logics by AND. So yeah, the proposal is to have this extra property custom filter that would be nullable, and the semantics would be that if it's not defined, it just passes through. If the predicate is defined, when it returns true, only such record is collected. Otherwise, no. So there were some discussions for some alternative designs. One was to not make it nullable. That is the case for other properties in options already. The downsides of that is that maybe it's not that idiomatic. The other one is that the current behavior is, for example, for time provider, if you supply null, which you shouldn't, but you can override that and supply null, it ends with null reference exception. So we think that declaring it as nullable is probably better. And the other discussion was about the semantics, whether the true should mean that the record stays or whether it's filtered out. To follow the existing behavior of the other filtering logic, meaning the log level and the category, the behavior is that whatever matches is collected. So we would like to follow the same principle here. Yeah, and that's basically it.
So if there's already a level and category filter, how do these three things interact?
Yeah, they are connected by AND. So
okay,
if you define this filter, everything needs to be.
So custom filter can't include a thing that was filtered out by category because that filter applies first.
Yeah.
In first, right? So presumably your custom filter doesn't even get called if it's an excluded category. Yeah.
Yes.
Which I think is sensible. Yeah. I think I like the proposal. As far as the nullability goes, like if you wanted to make it non-nullable, we could check in the setter and throw a proper argument null exception or something but I think nullable is fine.
Yeah, I mean, not knowing the rest of the extensions universe, nullable makes sense to me here.
Yeah, I think I prefer it.
All right, and
there's an output sync that's nullable already as well, which is an action with string.
And why is it experimental?
Yeah, I think it forced me. I already have created a PR. I think it's necessary.
Was it like an analyzer that said it was necessary?
Yeah.
Is fake clock record experimental?
I don't.
No, it is not. No, it's not. And the collector, no. Okay, I'll check it in the PR.
Okay, because
I'm also not sure it's like a telemetry experiment either. It's like a testing mock thing.
Yeah. Because if
but,
something's telling you it should be experimental, I mean, for one, ask somebody to explain why, and then for two, just suppress it because it shouldn't be experimental.
Yeah, okay. It's been a while. We will double check definitely during the code review.
Because yeah, I mean, maybe fake log record was experimental briefly or something, but it doesn't. It's not experimental right now, so.
should we make it a predicate? No, I'm just kidding. I am definitely kidding.
I love predicate. Though I don't understand why we added it, because we added it in the same release that we added func. Maybe it was added a month or two before. I wasn't here then. And yoink. Not part of the approval. Oh. And the word partial. It probably wants a namespace. I'm guessing that one.
You want the namespace? Yeah, that's it.
That's at least where fake log record is.
Yep. It's also the same for the options.
Yeah, that's the one here.
Okay. Yep. And bloop. That way the APIs of .NET, what PR approved this, can find it. If we don't put these things in, then it can't. So, at least I don't think it can. Maybe it does magic. Alright.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. PKCS 12 loader limits allow duplicate attributes. 117516. So, a year ago, we added the new certificate loader things, and one of the things that we block when loading a PFX, also known as a PKCS 12 file, is if any item has an attribute specified multiple times, because it doesn't make any sense. Therefore, you're probably trying to confuse the system, so we blocked it. Bouncy Castle apparently has a bug. At least I'm telling them they have a bug. They don't understand why they have a bug, or at least they seem confused as the notion of why it's a bug. Anyway, Bouncy Castle generates things that have duplicate attributes. They specify it with the exact same value twice, so it's not confusing. And then, because people have been hitting this and having to do complicated workarounds, it's now we just want to expose the option that says, fine, you're willing to trust a file that has these stupid data bugs. So, similar names that we have are we have ignore on some things, indicating that we're going to include them by default and ignore them if you change the setting. We have preserves, and then this one is allow, indicating that the default is we're going to block it, but if you write the line of code that says allow equal true, then we'll allow it. I thought we had other allows, but apparently not.
Yeah, if it were like ignore, I would assume that the attributes like get removed X50932, and if it were preserve, I'd expect you could read both somehow. So what happens? Is it like last wins? Try to read out the attributes.
Right. So what it means is we will not fail the load, and we will send it in the ambiguous state to the native loader.
I see. So these attributes aren't exposed via the .NET type.
Right. This would be, so very few things even use attributes on the objects, but like if you have an elliptic curve key, Windows will write down an attribute saying this should only be used for Diffie-Hellman instead of this should be used for DSA. And so if you have two of those, one of which you happen to encode it can be used only for DSA and not for Diffie-Hellman, and the other you said it can be used only for Diffie-Hellman and not for DSA, then it'll do whatever Windows does. They'll either read the first one or the last one, and it's not our job to say. We said don't do this.
I think
you
allow
said,
makes sense.
Do it.
Yeah, like if it were preserve, I would assume that otherwise the certificate would load fine without the attributes or something.
Right.
So I think allow, like you said, makes sense.
Yeah, the things using the preserve word are we're going to strip this out unless you tell us otherwise. And this one is we're not going to strip it out, but we're also not going to fail your load. So it is sort of preserve, except preserve means the opposite of preserve is ignore, and the opposite of allow here is reject. So
yeah.
Alrighty.
Yeah, or like the opposite of preserve might be strip or something, but yeah, I don't or like
right.
remove. But yeah.
Okay. Do we have anyone for add exclude statics to requires unreferenced code?
Yeah, I can talk about this one. I also just pinged Andy in case he wants to join. But so for requires unreferenced code and requires dynamic code, we allow annotating the type with those attributes. And what that does is it silences the related warnings from all members in the type, including static methods and instance methods. And in particular for instance methods, it makes it so that you can have an instance method that overrides a base or interface method that requires unreferenced code. And normally if there's a mismatch where the override doesn't have the attribute and the base does, that produces a warning. But you can get rid of that warning by annotating the type. So that's all fine. But the problem is that, like I said, it applies to statics and instance methods. So there are cases where you would want to prevent the warning from the override on a class. So you don't allow creating an instance of the class and calling instance members, but there might still be static methods on the class that are independently useful. So we want to kind of bifurcate those two pieces of functionality and make it possible to just get the instance behavior. So that's what exclude statics does. So, and yeah, that's what it does. It says only silence the warnings from the instance members. Statics are still okay.
Out of curiosity, are there any types in the BCL that motivated this?
That's where Andy would be a better person. I think this came up while he was annotating, but I don't know which library he was annotating.
Yeah. I don't know if it's like critical for API review. I was just curious.
Right. It definitely came up in a real world use case. Like the problem is,
good.
The problem with this virtual annotation thing is we don't have a way to we don't have a way to annotate that. So what we end up doing is we suppress that warning and annotate the constructor. But as a matter of like policy, we don't want to encourage people to suppress these warnings. There needs to be a way to do this without suppressing. So that's what makes it.
I almost wonder, like, would it be even more flexible to have like an opt-out? It's like actually doesn't require reference code.
In retrospect,
put it on the static methods. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably too late to change it at this point because we use this already. But that might have been nice.
saying it's too late to change it because we're using this means that there's no point in us
Why
discussing
are we
it here.
reviewing it? Yeah,
But
I know.
which means that you don't actually get to use that argument. But
Wait, sorry, I didn't follow that.
well, if you're saying yes, we should make a negative attribute, but we already wrote the code for exclude statics, and we're not willing to change what our code does, then if we said
sorry, what
it
I
needed
mean
to
to
be a
say,
different name, we'd have issues.
what I mean to say is that we already have the behavior where requires unreferenced code without exclude statics applies to instances and static members. So maybe I misunderstood, but I thought that we were saying it might have been nice to start from the opposite, like include statics as the option. Is that what you're saying?
Oh no, yeah, I hadn't communicated that well enough. No,
Oh.
yeah, I was actually suggesting that kind of similar in ASP.NET we have like allow anonymous, like which is the default, right? But you use that when you have like authorize on the class or something. So it'd be something like that, right? Where it basically opts out what you've already opted into at like a broader level. But yeah.
You don't always own the type that you're referencing, though. In fact, you frequently don't, and that's why you're using requires unreferenced and requires dynamic. So you couldn't put an attribute on the type to say include or exclude those statics. You want it to be dependent on the person that's using the requires unreferenced, and they're going to indicate whether they need the statics or not.
Yeah, but I think that at least I heard Stefan's suggestion as if we have requires unreferenced code, which puts you now in this requires unreferenced universe, that at some point, whether it's because you're an override and you've eliminated the unreferenced code need, or it's a static member on a type that otherwise said it, that now we want the JK I don't require unreferenced code attribute, which says even though the context I'm in says unreferenced code was required, I'm saying right here, I'm not suppressing the warning. I'm telling you I no longer require unreferenced code.
And I'm not saying like I'm convinced that this is the answer, but that is what I was proposing.
I see.
So it's the cancel the state attribute. But if we think that a good portion of it is covered by saying requires unreferenced code, so again, the scenario here is that you've put requires unreferenced code on the type instead of on the members that required it. So now you've covered all members of the type, and you're saying the statics don't count because they're not doing the unreferenced code things.
Yeah, and it's not just for kind of going back on something where we already annotated a type. It's for libraries that we haven't annotated yet, and in some cases the only way to correctly annotate them is to silence warnings from virtuals and leave the statics open. And currently we have a few places in the BCL where we do that by suppressing warnings, and that's not great. We can't really recommend that to customers.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, the needing knobs like this and the JK I don't require unreferenced code anymore attribute is why I personally don't like when we let these attributes be applied to the type, when we're just saying, it lets somebody do a quick and dirty, write it once, and it applies to all the members, because we always end up needing to carve out holes. And honestly, Control-C, Control-V onto all your members doesn't take all that much time. Plus, probably you can get the Copilot to do it these days. So that's a rant, not related to this.
Approve this, and then we just like
no, we
this methods that need this, we apply it to all the members.
We already have this on types. It already has an attribute usage target of type. So we've already shot ourselves in the foot, and this is just applying a band-aid.
To your point though, right? Like anything that would need exclude statics, you could just move the attribute to every single method that needs it, right? Or is it because that's what Tanner was talking about earlier, where you might have derived types with new methods that need the attribute.
Yeah, the piece of functionality that just silencing all the warnings, like you can silence all the warnings by individually annotating each method, but the thing you can't get is the behavior where you want to prevent the virtual override warnings while still allowing statics. You can't just annotate all the virtual methods because, or maybe. Or hold on, now I'm getting a little confused.
Anyway, it's because we already have attribute target class. The attribute's already on classes, and we probably. Actually, I don't know what your breaking change rules for unreferenced code is. I don't know if you could say everyone should just move them from the type to the methods, but they'll then say, but it's on the class. Why can't I just have a turny offy knob? So we can approve the turny offy knob. You like all these technical terms I use?
Love the technical terms.
All right. I don't think we ever use get_init in attributes, and presumably you mean the public copies and not the internal copies. So internal becomes public, and get_init becomes get_set. Otherwise,
Okay.
seems good to me.
Okay.
Stefan, Steven, Tanner, second grunt.
Seems good.
Yeah, I mean, it seems clear enough. So that's good.
Yeah, sorry. So the thing I was getting confused about is the thing that just annotating individual methods doesn't let you solve, I think, is this. If you have a base method that doesn't have an annotation, and you have a virtual override that has some warnings, you want to be able to silence the warnings in the override, and you can't do that by applying the attribute to the virtual method, because then you get a separate warning about a mismatching annotations. So the only way to silence that is these special semantics where you put it on the type, and that means you get a warning if you ever try to construct the type, and no virtual override warnings. So we still need that behavior, and we don't have a way to get that behavior just by annotating the individual methods. That was the key piece I didn't explain well the first time.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, could you annotate all of the constructors in that case? But yeah, like I don't.
Yeah, that's what we do. We
fine.
annotate the
Yeah, yeah.
constructors, but you still then have to suppress warnings from the virtuals, and that's because you get if you just annotate the constructors, you can still get those warnings, and we don't want to tell people to suppress.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm gonna double check that I actually marked that one as approved. Yay! I got one right. All right. Expose TensorMarshal for manipulating the underlying biref of a tensor span 117373.
Yeah, so much as is the case with memory marshal for span, there are certain cases where you need to, for performance reasons or other scenarios, manually create a span given a biref and the appropriate shape data. In the case of span, it's just an int length. With tensor span, you have the exact same scenarios, the exact same needs, and so the proposal is we expose a TensorMarshal class, we expose the create tensor span, create read-only tensor span, and get reference APIs mirroring the equivalent APIs for create span, create read-only span, and get reference that exists on memory marshal. With create tensor span, it has to take the underlying length for the ref t data and then the shape as well, and it still does some minimal validation that is correct, so it is not effectively zero cost like create span is, but there's no way to really do that without doing some bare bones validation. But yeah.
So TensorMarshal is new here.
Yes.
Is pinned defaulted elsewhere and not here, or is it never defaulted?
It's defaulted elsewhere. It's not defaulted here because the user should be explicit about pinnedness. This is like an esoteric API most people won't be using, so I think it's fine for them to be very explicit on whether the underlying data is pinned or not.
That's fair. I know we have various complexities with get reference. Memory Marshal does only have the get reference from a span, but don't we have some other? Oh, sorry, I'm thinking of get pinnable reference.
Yeah, so get pinnable reference handles default and normalize and returning a null ref and doing some special checks. So if get pinnable reference, if the length is 0, it always returns a null ref, so that you get a null pointer. Whereas get reference bypasses that and just gives you the raw by ref, so it can point you to an empty and it can point you to a piece of memory that you're not allowed to dereference.
Right. Okay, and is in the correct keyword in 2025 for the get references?
Yeah, so this isn't getting the reference, this isn't converting the by ref of the in here to the ref t. It's taking the tensor span via in because it is a large read-only struct. And we want it to be implicit that the user, we want it basically abstracted away from the user that it's being passed by reference for performance reasons. The actual by ref being retrieved is the one contained in the tensor span.
Okay, and this ref of get reference is to the all zeros data element.
Sorry, what do you mean by the all zeros data element?
Well, tensor span. So, your tensor span's not pointing at an item; it's pointing at a bunch of items, but it's only giving back a ref to one. So it's the passing 0 for every valid index.
Correct.
Yeah, not a value that is always 0, but the span sub 0, sub 0, sub 0, sub 0, until you get smacked.
Yeah, element 0.
Yeah.
Tanner, if we ever had sparse tensors, we would be using different types to represent them, right?
Correct. We would end up having to we would end up having a different data type because you couldn't represent it with a tensor span, which expects the backing
to be contiguous.
Yeah. The nuance with tensor span is that while the backing allocation may be contiguous, the valid elements to access may not be contiguous. Like if you've got a 2x2 slice out of a 4x4 matrix, then you'll have 2 valid elements, and then you have to skip some amount of memory, and that's specified by the shape.
So that's kind of what I was getting at with regards to get reference. So do we expose publicly on TensorSpan all the necessary information for someone to know which offsets from the returned reference they're allowed to use?
Yes, that's the strides data.
And if there's an obvious calculation that can be applied and documented?
Yeah, it's the standard arithmetic. So with 2-dimensional, it's y times width plus x, for example. So you effectively just take the index of the current rank, multiply it by the length of the next rank, and then add it to and then sum across until you reach the final rank, and then that just scales by 1.
It's not going against this API, but this feels like we're making it really easy to accidentally point to something you don't mean to point to. And again, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, because I understand there's scenarios where it's important for perf to be able to do this, but to whatever extent we can document the heck out of exactly what you're doing and how to use it, I think we should.
Yeah, we can definitely make sure to document those examples and do the same thing on get pinnable reference, which has the same consideration.
Yeah. And sorry, I missed what you said earlier. The only difference between get pinnable reference and get reference is the same as we have elsewhere, which is that it's not doing a length check.
Yeah, it's not doing the null ref normalization. So so if you're tracking an empty array, it will return you the ref to the underlying GC allocation for the empty array, and you're not actually, which will keep the empty array alive, but you're not allowed to dereference it because the length is 0.
Whereas this is just it's literally just giving you back the ref that's stored in the span.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we already have get pinnable reference, it's probably moot. But given that it's probably hard, because the ref that you get back off of get reference is either out of bounds because your length was 0, or is the correct answer. But you don't know that you can add. You don't know that you can look at the next thing in linear memory without doing work. So would it be better to not add get reference and just make somebody go through the get span first? Because then they're told you're allowed to talk about this linearly.
You're always allowed to talk about at least one element linearly.
Why? Sorry, yeah, this one, but not the next one.
Right. But that's the same thing with span. You have a length check you have to do.
Right, but I'm saying the get span API that we just approved, you would know. You call the tensor and you say, give me the span starting here, and I want 10 elements, and it'll say, here you go, and now you know they're guaranteed linear, instead of
But what if
call
you
get
did
reference
want to
and then just move to the next one.
I see. But like, I mean, you could access the non-contiguous sections today if you did the math that Tanner was talking about. Like, with your proposal, it would almost seem verboten. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, do you have to call get span for each non-contiguous section? Like, why? This is like the high performance TensorMarshal API. If you know the math, do it.
Fair enough. I mean, you can get the ref from element 0 by going through get span anyway, or by going through get pinnable reference, apparently.
Absolutely.
And then you
go
can just do
past
your
the
own bad
boundary of the
math.
span.
But
yeah, exactly. No, you could, but like if we forced you to go through span, we would almost be saying it's more correct to call get span for each contiguous reference, which I don't think is true. So like, why not just
safer?
Yeah, I don't know.
But then the people who are using this are the ones that are going to say, you didn't provide me my API. I'm going to define my own class that mirrors the layout and depend on unsafe things, and they're going to make themselves even more unsafe.
all right, so you think that this is a foot gun that prevents a double-barreled foot gun?
Yes.
Foot gunning.
I'm curious, Tanner, again, not against this, but given all the calculations that go into indexing into various parts of the tensor span and what you then do with the resulting data, does the extra branch between get pinnable reference and get reference matter?
The consideration is more about whether you have to deal with null refs or not. Null refs are tricky to deal with, and we don't necessarily want people calling get pinnable reference when they don't get a pointer. The whole reason get pinnable reference returns a null ref is because we expect users to be using it in fixed, and so they're going to get a T star back, in which case they can just check for null. Whereas if you're getting a biref from it, then you actually have to check, is this a null ref or not, in addition to checking the lengths. And there's just some more complexities there.
I mean, dealing with the null ref is painful, but it's less painful than dealing with the ubref. It's like the empty span, as opposed to the null span, will give you a ref t that's not null. You just better not read or write to it, or read from it or write to it.
Right. In which case you have to be doing a length check regardless.
Yeah.
But the actual logic and arithmetic, especially as you'd use in a typical get reference scenario, isn't really that complex. Like, you have to do more than just span because it's multidimensional, but it still effectively boils down to near linear iteration. And the branch isn't in every single loop iteration or anything. It happens at the end of the innermost loop body. So you have the for y equals blah, for x equals blah, and you don't actually do y times width plus x every iteration. You compute the linear offset once and you increment by 1, and then at the end of the loop you increment by the remaining width. That way you don't have to be doing the multiplications every iteration. So it ends up very efficient when you are wanting to maximize your perf there.
Yeah, I guess from a perf perspective, it just seems like the extra null check is or length check is a drop in the bucket compared to what you're doing, even if you can optimize everything else. I also don't fully understand the not checking for null argument, because if you had a default span and you called this, you're going to get back a null ref, right?
No, get reference for. So okay, yeah. So for a default span, you will get null ref and a length 0.
Right.
Um.
So you still need to be
cognizant.
Yeah. But then for empty, you avoid the additional scenario in the checks, and the same could be said for span of t. The branch is likely not significant in many cases. However, if you're working with small, dense data, it can be.
But
like a matrix 4x4.
My recollection, and I could be wrong here, is that for span we had get reference, which was the raw ref, and then we later invented the notion of get pinnable reference, doing the null normalization. And if that's the order, then the question is, why doesn't this think that the second generation API is good enough?
I'm not sure if that was the order, but Steven just dropped. I'm not sure if that was the order or not, but the get pinnable reference was specifically designed for the language needs and the needs for fixed to work as expected, particularly with back compat towards how string was already working.
Because get reference was net core 2. Feels like it's going to be hard for get pinnable reference to beat that.
Yeah, that was core 3. But get pinnable reference was designed for language needs and keeping compat with how string and array already behaved for empty ones.
Fair enough. I mean, I know that in crypto code we basically never use get pinnable reference because the null normalization is actually bad for crypto Win32. They don't treat null and 0 and empty and 0 as the same thing often. Cause yay. Alright. Alright. So I mean, it sounded like Steve had some questioning existence, but not a.
He said he was fine with the API.
Yeah. So unless we want to quibble over the parameters, I guess it seems good as proposed. Or do you promise the parameters are in a sensible order?
Yeah, they match the same order that we're using in tensor shape create. So we take the ref, we take the length of the backing allocation for the ref, and then we take the shape in the same order that we take it everywhere else. So length, then strides, then is pinned.
Sorry, what does the pinned part do? Yeah.
So pinned is for the case of you're basically indicating whether the backing memory is already pinned or not. So for example, you have an array you allocated using GC allocate pinned array.
Exactly. Yeah. So why does TensorSpan need to know? Yeah.
Because there are APIs that indicate whether the data is definitely pinned for libraries like TorchSharp or Onyx that are doing various operations, and they need to know whether they can safely get a T star out that can be used long term without needing to create an explicit pinned handle, which is a fairly expensive operation.
Is that stored in the tensor span somewhere?
Yeah, there's a flag.
Okay.
And so pointers, and there's a property exposed is pinned. So pointers are always pinned. If you do create and pass in pin true, we will use the right GC API. Otherwise, if you have your own managed pinned allocation, you have to go through one of these APIs and say, hey, I promise this is really pinned. And we do that because it's a dangerous operation to say an arbitrary allocation, GC allocation, is definitely pinned.
Got it. Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I see the flags now. I didn't realize, yeah, we use that to check the safety of passing it to native libraries. But makes sense.
Okay. All right. So sounds like we're good there. No, don't do things that I don't want to do. And Jeremy Korazinski says he can attend Aaron's issue, so we'll get the last thing for 10, and then at our diminished status we'll ignore future. Maybe there's an invite button.
For a moment, I was like, who approved that interface name? But then, of course, com, like, obviously.
Yeah. It's clearly somebody having fun.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay. So this API is for a particular scenario that hits only with com interop. So basically for traditional com has a particular set of interfaces for supporting propagating errors. The iErrorInfo interface represents like the actual error itself, but there's another one that goes on the object that you actually call com interfaces on, call methods on com interfaces on, called iSupportErrorInfo. Traditionally, like the correct mechanism, the correct way to respect this is to check for iSupportErrorInfo before using an iErrorInfo object. For built-in com, we do this. P-invokes don't have this as a concept, but for source-generated com, we don't, and this is causing failures for customers. So for us to be able to build this for source-generated com to respect, we need to add these APIs. And these APIs are basically you throw exception for the H result and use iSupportErrorInfo on the passed in object for the target interface to figure out, hey, should we use the iErrorInfo when building the exception?
All right. So is Punk the object in question?
Yes, Punk is the object in question.
And what's the GUID?
The GUID is the interface to pass to iSupportErrorInfo. It's basically saying, should I use the iErrorInfo results when calling methods on this interface?
So it's the type that you are currently interpreting punc as?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So you know from the call context that you think that this is going to be an IOLE data graph, and so you're passing the GUID of IOLE data graph here and asking, is this punc and I support error info?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you go to the bottom of that issue, the implementation's right there. That is the action. I did it quickly. It's a very straightforward operation.
So is this like an alternative to an existing API that like doesn't respect this basically?
So if you look at
So
the
they used
bottom
to
of
be safe.
the implementation, so we have one, get exception for HR. That takes an error code and an error info. The problem is it's what Jeremy was getting at. Using the error info is conditional based on the caller. That isn't true in p invokes, but in com, you basically say, is this error info for me or is it for something else? If it's for something else, you ignore it.
Yeah, so there are two overloads currently of get exception for HR. There's one that takes an int and uses the live error info if the live I error info always if one exists. There's the overload that takes the H result and an I error info pointer, and that's the one that's being used at the bottom. And if you pass -1, then it says there's no error info available, so don't grab the system one. The system one is not valid for this check. And then this would be introducing a new one that's doing get the exception for this H result for this interface on this object. And we did the order of the parameters specifically because the GUID plus int pointer is not the same as like the int pointer in the two argument one that's used on the bottom. Those are two different objects.
Okay. Do we use all caps IID normally? Because normally ID gets a little d, assuming that's identifier. But if that's like
it's interface ID, but I think it is capital I, lowercase d. I think is what I've seen. I didn't even think of that.
Okay.
Pretty sure I've seen it that way. I think query interface would have it, wouldn't it, Jeremy?
Yeah.
It's just IID and on query interface, which also works. It doesn't have to be target. I just put that in there.
Yeah, I think IID is the right thing for us to do.
Okay, and I see that QI takes it as ref. Are you is taking it as value here correct?
The other
you can take it as in if we want to really be like a ref read only, I guess.
I wouldn't, because that's different than the other overloads. Oh, wait a minute. The other overloads don't have any GUID, don't they? Right. Yeah, that doesn't.
We can. Fine. Yeah, I would say take it as in or ref read only, whichever one is the one that you don't have to put it as a local, because it is so annoying to have a local for the query interface. I hate doing that for Marshal query interface, but it also like will let you avoid the copy if you can avoid the copy. So
right, like in doesn't require a change at the call site, right?
Yeah, I think in should be fine. I think in's the right one.
It's obvious, yeah. And this only gets called in like the error path, right? Like this is when you have like an actual error code that you're curious whether you need to.
No, this gets called for every H result.
Okay,
We're gonna end
I
up
was
calling
curious.
this for everything because throw exception for HR doesn't throw if it's a successful error code or
I
successful
see.
H result.
Yeah,
Because they're
I wasn't
successful.
sure if that was something you expected the caller to check. So yeah, I mean, all the more important, I suppose, to optimize.
We have, Jeremy, just to be clear, we have updated Marshal.query interface to take IID as an in now.
Yes. Yay. Thank you. That is my favorite. Makes me very happy. I
not
hated
sure.
dealing with this.
Recently?
Yeah, I think it was a 9. I think it was a 9.
Yeah.
Okay. I wonder if IMO doesn't annotate it correctly. Because
Yeah,
APIs
so,
have just says ref, but I don't know a thing that takes in, so I can't compare. I can't compare easily.
Historically, it does take a ref though, so that's fine.
Fair enough. But changing
Yeah,
ref
but
to
not-
in would have been a compile failure, wouldn't it?
Right.
No, with the new like ref read only stuff.
No,
where
I
you
mean,
can use the ref keyword. Yeah, and the public docs have it as in.
there was a little bit of stress to get it in, but we got it in.
Okay. Yeah. Does that mean you can use the
Nice.
ref keyword on in?
Probably.
Yes, there was a change for that because of this whole thing. Like when they added ref
That
read
makes
only, they
sense.
also allowed you to use the ref keyword on in, so that you can switch between in and ref read only, and then it was to allow you to switch like from something from ref read only to in to allow you to pass values without being a source breaking change for everybody else.
Gotcha.
And then you can use the in keyword on the ref read only, but ref read only requires you to actually be passing in a ref. You can't just be passing in a value that gets an implicit location.
That sense.
Tanner was there for all those conversations.
Yes, and it was very unfortunate that the very first iteration didn't allow those source compatible changes.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, clearly I'm just thinking of V1 of... It's like I thought that the keyword in was optional, but I didn't think you could say ref when it said in.
I can see why it wasn't. If it weren't for like adapting existing APIs, it is just like, why? But yeah, given that it makes it easier to migrate from ref read only to N, it's
Yeah.
a very
And
logical
and
change.
notably, it while it is not an error, there are scenarios, and they're all sensible scenarios where using ref X for an API that takes in or ref read only, the compiler will warn and say, hey, you should be using in here instead. Move off of using the ref keyword. It does. I don't think it does it for mutable values, but it will do it if you're trying to pass in something that is actually read only itself. So it surfaces the thing and helps users migrate over towards the thing that is more semantically clear in their source code.
Fair enough. All right, and then since we've made a comparison to QI before, QI takes these in the other order. Is this the order that makes sense for throw exception for HR, or should we flip them?
I prefer having them in this order because I don't want people thinking that the 2 parameter throw exception for HR and the 3 parameter that like you'd pass the same int pointer value to both. Those are because they are 2 fundamentally different objects.
Okay.
So having them in this order ensures that you don't think that it's like, oh, like if I call the 2 parameter one, that's just like the 3 parameter one with some default value for the 3rd parameter. If you guys don't agree, I'm fine switching it up, but that was my rationale.
I was just asking a consistency question, and I agree with your if the overload is adding this GUID completely changes the meaning of the pointer, then I agree that I like it as an infix better than a suffix, because now you're not adding this GUID, you're inserting this GUID, and that's different than comma. something. So, even though you can do it by just moving your IP to the left and hitting comma, but who cares? All right. Well, we use a P when we don't normally use a P, and we have a very strangely named id, but that matches QI, so yay com. We happy?
Yep.
Love it. Thank you much.
And we do generally have both the get and the throw on the exception.
Yeah, they're both
Yes.
there. Originally, it was just the throw, but the get. We need to get. So.
Okay.
Like the throw is just call the get if it's not null throw. But most people use the throw, and it's nice. Some people are going to want to use the get.
Fair enough.
Because we're not the only people that interrupt things.
Yeah, I was just making sure we weren't inventing it for this when we didn't have it for the existing flow. It was so yeah, just making sure. All right, thank you guys, and sorry I didn't actually invite you to the meeting, Aaron.
Good. 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 All right. Talk to you later. Thanks all.
See you guys later.
All right. We've cleared everything marked for 10, and we're in a diminished quorum state, so I think we should probably just call it there.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us online, and good input. Pointed out a mistake I made, and we got to make fun of all those punks that are looking at me. And you saw one of my cats. So we'll see you next week. Same .NET time, same .NET channel. And until then, Auf Wiedersehen.